Hi, and welcome. Today I wanted to try to capture um, what I'm going through personally as part of my journey with healing from trauma, and in particular, CPTSD, which is also complex um, post traumatic symptoms or childhood. And in my case, it's mainly childhood, but also complex. Um, I can do another chat on, what is CPTSD or what falls under that, I guess, categorization and how that's different from PTSD. Um, but it's got its own unique, I guess, set of challenges in terms of healing because it's complex. It means it's not from one event. It's multiple that's been layered on. Um, so today's, I guess, insight or realization that I had that's been very interesting is that I have been, I guess, actively working on healing um, trauma and knowingly had a sense that it was CPTSD in the back of my mind, but never really had a clear, I guess, understanding or full understanding of what that might look like. Plus, it can be a little bit different for everyone. Um, and after learning about polyvagal theory, in fact, first I learned there was a ladder model, but then I learned I guess, a circular model where you, as a person, when you're healing, depending where you're at, as they say, come up the ladder. So you're coming out of functional freeze, which is really at the bottom of the model, the diagram. Um, you'll oscillate between sympathetic nerve activation and parasympathetic activation, and both of them can be either like positive or negative in terms of, is it a stress response or more like excited, experience that has you a little bit in uh flight or fight. So what's been fascinating is that while I'm fluctuating actually between the functional freeze, um, sort of going down into functional freeze where I feel a little bit numb, I feel a little bit detached, to, oh, I actually feel a little activated. My nervous system is, kind of stressed, but then the parasympathetic is also activated. I feel sleepy. I feel groggy because it's trying to relax me. Um, and both are happening, right? So some days it's a real roller coaster ride. Um, so while that's going on with the nervous system, there's also the brain as part of the greater nervous system. The brain and the functioning of your body. That's where I've noticed some very interesting, I guess, ways of healing that's been happening. Where for a long time I was in functional freeze. I'm highly functional, despite being in the freeze state for many years. Didn't realize that was the case. Um, and now, while I'm coming up, healing, and feeling more activated, I notice that as I'm starting to feel, and then I can fluctuate back to not feeling. And now, as I'm feeling safer to explore all the things that I used to enjoy doing, that I notice consciously I have memories of the things I enjoy. So I can remember what the things I would think. I can remember how I would feel or how I could sense it in my body. But at the same time, I don't feel a connection to it anymore. And I was kind of perplexed by that. So, doing a little research, I found out that as we come out of it, because part of our brain has been rewired, sure, I have the memory still, but how my brain responds to those things may be different. And I may need to actually reprogram myself, retrain, because I may not enjoy the same things. I may enjoy it differently. So I have to actually purposely do activities, feel safe enough to go do the activities and relearn, re-imprint what my preferences are because it only remembers what it knew in the past. So that's really fascinating. And it's weird to be in that space of knowing what you used to like, but then not and feeling a little blank around, what do I like now? Because what I thought I liked, what I knew I liked, I don't necessarily feel anything towards it currently. And it's a little bit confusing. So I'm curious if anyone else is going through that. Um, and interestingly enough, in parallel, my dog, who is a rescue, who definitely has had some traumas. I see he has trauma triggers. I don't fully know what he's been through, but definitely that he was abandoned and lost, found as a stray. And he seemed to have been lost for a while because after I started fostering him to see if he was a good candidate to be a dog and fit in with my lifestyle, and that he would be happy with what I can offer him, I would notice certain things about him. And one was, he started to gain weight, right? After some time to decompress. And I discovered he was actually quite underweight, even though he didn't look it. He's quite fluffy. So, but I've had him now. I'm trying to remember. Adopted him in 2019. So, going into um, the seventh year. And as I was doing some somatic healing from the traumas, there's some very big ones um, that I also released his the same time as mine was getting done because, you know, animals often co regulate with other beings that surround them. So, with some major releases, I've noted in the last month there's a big shift in his behavior where he's sleeping a lot more, or that when he does sleep, he's sleeping so much more deeply where it's like I almost can't wake him up. And it's a little bit alarming because, of course, he's around 10 years old. So it's like, could it be age? But then realizing I'm actually also sleeping a lot deeper, which I am tracking like through, I use a Fitbit and it tracks my sleep. I'm doing nervous system regulation therapy as well as somatic releases. So I sleep a lot deeper. So I guess, for him, that's likely similar. And after some research, it validates that. But the other thing that has me more alarmed is that um, I thought maybe he's becoming hard of hearing, but then it's not consistent. um, and especially with commands. If I call him, he seems to kind of stall out. He stares at me and doesn't respond. Um, and through the research, I've discovered that's pretty common. So there is similarity there where the brain that learned the commands, some of the commands he knew beforehand, if it's rewiring, it may not not necessarily remember, but not have the same effect. So it's likely that I will need to retrain him, reinforce. Um, yes, because all the commands that I've taught him that are new, he has recall of those. But the most basic ones like sit, come, um, he's not consistent. And it's fascinating. Um, so yeah, so I'm definitely keeping an eye and we'll see what happens in another month's time. Um, Based on my research, their healing process, so this behavior showing up, this shift can last from a couple weeks to a few months, right? It depends on what kind of trauma, how long it was, or how long his nervous system needs to heal and how it impacts his brain. So we're both in parallel healing from trauma. Um, Fascinating. Some days it makes it challenging where, yeah, if both of us are not feeling at our best, a little grumpy, also a little out of it. Uh, yeah, it's definitely made for interesting days. But overall, I feel like we've been bonding much deeper because he has more capacity to connect deeply. He was very much quite aloof, um, very like transactional in the moment. So now there's a bit more, um, I guess, a deeper, intimate interactions where he wants to snuggle and will snuggle for longer, not just he was very much like a cat before. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, I'm curious to know, anyone else who is on the healing journey and if you can relate to what I'm experiencing and whether similarly or maybe completely different. I think it's great to learn from one another and just the more we know what's possible, right, we can kind of determine what good looks like in terms of um, the light at the end of the tunnel with this healing journey. So, wishing everyone loving kindness from others to yourself, to others, a lot of compassion, and sending you lots of love and light. Until next time.